This is David Tulis, and I do thank you for giving me a minute of your time. I am here at Nooga Radio, and brought to you by Nooganomics.com, the website for the man who matters, a platform in which the slow man of Chattanooga, the man who asks the dumb questions, has a chance to digress on questions of law and liberty and prosperity. A lot of attention I give to the things that interfere with and interrupt the practice of liberty, and I do that because as a writer of a novel will tell you, you want to have the good guy, and then you want to have the foil, right? The foil is the antagonist, right? The protagonist is the hero. The antagonist is the one who's anti the hero, and he's a kind of a bad guy, and you want that man there in all of his evil to act according to his own free will, to highlight by way of contrast the virtues of the hero and what the hero learns, right? Every good novel has the main character, the hero or heroine, develop in character. There's always something that this person learns, and with it, the reader as well. And novels, like all art, have a didactic purpose. They have an instructional purpose to teach something that the author believes is important. And so we have what was I saying? So here we have, yeah, that's right. We're talking about the things that interfere with liberty and prosperity. And often today, the theme has been, even President Trump running for election stressed the theme is that the state itself is the problem. We don't have foreign enemies really anymore, and we don't have as many domestic enemies as we used to. Crime back in the 1970s and 1980s was very high. And of course, that was a very chaotic time of mass deconstruction of society by universities and academicians and the welfare state. And now, though, that young generation that was comprising much of the hoodlum population, the bad guys, are out of jail and having families and running businesses or being employees. And so crime is down all around the United States. And the threats to prosperity, the thing that makes people afraid, is less private crime than it is offenses by the state itself through its agents and through its extensive claims upon virtually every aspect of human existence. The state, as that kind of false deity, has reached down to commend you for your toilet tank size, and to make sure that you don't corporally punish your children, and that they have all the right ideas, right? And for that purpose, they have to go to the public school. So we're looking at the hero and the heroine versus the antagonist in the story. And on the David Tulis Show, we often have to just look at where the problems are, right? And where there is you might say, a kind of a judgment against the people by the operation of the state through public schools, for example. That's one major area, I would say, of discouragement, and where the future generations are left slack, left unmotivated, and find it impossible to really grasp their situation and their independence, right? And so we want to, here on the David Tulis program, look at these issues, and what I'd like to do is try to just summarize where I think we stand as far as Chattanooga and Hamilton County go, in the sense of the police and the deputy, right? These are the armed men who, and so there are a few women involved as well in that trade, who are enforcers of law and guarantors of the peace. Now, the sheriff is the most important person in the county, and that's because we have a common law Anglo-Saxon heritage. The sheriff has a military authority, and he has the power. The governor can call the unorganized militia into existence if there's a threat to the nation of Tennessee. Locally, the sheriff has a similar authority to organize people as militia if there were an insurrection, a war, rebellion, or some kind of chaos that required more manpower than he has. And I think it's important to know where he comes from. He comes from the reef of the Shire in Old England, and about probably just after the time of the creation of chancery courts. And his authority is connected with the land. It is a royal authority. He represents the king, but he also has an interest in the people. And our number is 800-8949, 800-8949. And caller, this is David Tulis. You're live on the air.
That was a great interview. And yeah, the sheriff is the highest law enforcement officer. A lot of sheriffs don't realize the power they have, and they're also put there to protect the people from federal interference and federal tyranny. A lot of times they don't want to get into that, and they support their brethren, but really that's part of what the sheriff is about. David, I want to bring something up. I don't know, it sounds like open forum that you may not want to talk about, but let's talk about, because you're a libertarian. You're kind of an apologist for the inappropriate behavior in the so-called black community, and with taking a knee in the protest. I'm so sick of hearing these whiny crybaby blacks in particular, and I'm not a racist. You know, I treat everyone equally, but if you don't point out, I'm a manager, and if you don't point out a problem, you don't solve it. Foreigners will come over here with not knowing how to speak English, and in 5 years they have a successful business because they're family-oriented. I am so sick of generation after generation after generation of primarily blacks living in welfare, primarily black males who impregnate women, that don't want to be culturalized by the Western culture. And if you don't have Western culture, basically you're tribal, and you may as well just start chasing animals, and we may as well live as we did 1,000 years ago. But you know, if you're saying I don't want to adopt the white Western European culture, you're not going to be successful in this country. And blacks have got to stop telling blacks, hate the white man. The white man will keep you down. Western culture, black power, Africa. Who cares? I don't care where I came from. I care where I'm going. We're not black Americans or Italian Americans. We're Americans. And listen, people come over here to become Americans, and they're successful. There is no excuse for generation after generation of blacks to live in poverty other than to say, there must be something psychologically wrong. Is there something psychologically wrong within the black community? What's the issue here? You're going to blame God. How much more money can we throw at this problem? We just need better schools? No. We have to point the finger and say, get off your rear end, assimilate to Western culture, get an education, get a job, and stop whining and complaining and blaming everybody else, you big baby. Well, you brought us over enslaved. Thank God we brought you over enslaved, folks. If we didn't, you'd have nothing. You'd still be enslaved in Africa where they had more slaves than America. Stop blaming everybody but yourself.
Okay, what's the question?
Look in the mirror and say, it starts with me today. There's no excuse, David. There's none.
What's the question?
Coddling them and this liberal crap is hurting the black community. Hurting the black community. They're more impoverished now than they've ever been.
That's not true.
It is true. Look at Detroit. It's destroyed. I dare you to go to Camden, New Jersey at 2 o'clock in the morning. You'll be killed because you're white. I dare you to go to certain parts of Chattanooga at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Camden actually has had some important police reforms.
You know how many gangs are in Chattanooga? How many murders are? You know why? Because daddy's not around. Because he bangs his girlfriend. She has another baby. They get more welfare. They're the facts, and no one wants to talk about it. I'll talk about it.
Okay, well, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say to that screed from Mike, and yes, indeed, there are people who have what Edward Banfield in his book Unheavenly City and Unheavenly City Revisited in the 1980s, a very remarkable analysis, very conservative analysis, and as he describes it, those who live in ghettos and poor parts of town often have a very short-term time perspective. They think only in terms of their immediate pleasures, their immediate gratifications. They do not do what Max Weber describes as the basis of capitalism. That is to say, the delay of self-gratification, the delay of pleasure, and saving and investing and hard work. That's the so-called the Protestant work ethic that he wrote about in the 1920s. And the problem is not race. The problem is if whites are ahead, it's not because of their skin color. If blacks are behind, it's not because of their skin color. And I would say not even because of institutional racism, but it is a matter of ethic, a kind of a lack of the Christian judicial ethic, if you will, that has people looking to God and His commands. What does God require of me? What am I supposed to do for myself and my family? What can I do despite oppression, despite poverty, to further myself and advance my own interest? That's where the free market comes from, and that's where wealth comes from, is looking out for other people. So in other words, the ghetto perspective is short term and it's omphalocentric. It's looking at your omphalos, which is your navel, right? It's navel gazing. It's all about you. All your efforts are about me, rather than you, right? Capitalism, the free market, small business, big business are all about you, the customer. And that's why money comes, capital comes, wealth comes to those who think about other people first. And that's true regardless of your race, even regardless of your religious background. Okay, you can be a Muslim and be a successful entrepreneur. You can be an atheist and be a successful entrepreneur, because what you're doing there is borrowing from the Christian ethic. And again, that is modeled by Christ. Christ died for not just the indifferent, but for his enemies, right? And so the capitalist, the entrepreneur, the Chattanoogan, right? The Chattanoogan here in Hamilton County who's prospering and starting his own business or just working for someone else. He is thinking of the other first. That's why Chattanooga is largely blessed, because we have many people of all races who are doing that very thing. Now, I appreciate your comments, Mike, but let me just it sounds like perhaps I'm not answering everything you said, and I don't think that I can. There were numerous points made there, and one other point that if I could just summarize what Mike said is that people often who are black are blaming their ill state on others, and again, that's just blame shifting, and it's excuse making. That's a sin and a fault in anyone who does it, right? Anyone who's given to that, they are foregoing and foreshortening their time horizon down to that short time horizon that Banfield talks about in his book. Now, Chattanooga and Hamilton County, I would like to suggest, are blessed largely by the absence of extended and terrifying violence of the kind we've seen in police videos from around the country. Why have we not seen more unlawful use of state violence by deputies and police departments here in Chattanooga and Red Bank and East Ridge and Saudi Daisy? And we have seen, remember the Red Bank gas station lot beating of the immigrant who didn't speak in English, and there was a criminal case there, and also a civil case filed. Those kinds of things, even the Stevenson execution of the plumber, these are unusual, right? These are aberrations from the norm. Now, what I'm suggesting is, even though I, David Tulis, your host here at 92.7, am a sharp critic of police abuse and police violence, let me just say that stepping back, and here Jim Hammond in our interview gives occasion to step back. On the whole, Chattanooga, on the whole, Hamilton County is blessed by God with a pacific and mild group of men who oversee these departments. Again, we've had these cases. We've had the Javerio Eagle killing, I think 2 years ago now, and others. But on the whole, we had the Chris Sexton shooting, the flashing conflict there, bullets flying, only going one direction at the Tractor Supply in Saudi Daisy. That was this year after a 2-hour chase. A man who was unhinged, right? A man who was irrational. And I suggest in our coverage of that killing that there could have been an alternative. And of course, Jim Hammond would say, well, you're second guessing, we're Monday morning quarterbacking and so on. But I suggest that by policy, these situations be de-escalated, and that the work being done in that direction from Sheriff Hammond, which he says is 5 years old, that be extended and that it be invigorated. There needs to be more of it. But now, backing away from that, backing away from the instances of killings of Americans, right? Aside from the cases that we can highlight one by one, on the whole, Chattanooga and Hamilton County, I would say, is under God's favor and under God's blessing. And there are several reasons for that. And what I would suggest is a very positive analysis for Chattanooga and Hamilton County. And again, these are questions of God's grace, right? That the sheriff is mild, that the officers are mild, that they're patient, that they're generally less willing rather than more to create a situation where there's a confrontation, there's a line in the sand in which time has run out, right? That's always why the American is shot dead by multiple bullets in chest, groin, and legs. He's shot dead because the officers thought there's no more time. We have no more time to give to this, and this is it. That arriving at that point, right? The arriving at that line is where American people are killed. People who have not committed any capital offense are shot dead summarily executed. Okay, so there needs to be more of that. But just backing up again, I'm not sure I'm delivering my point. Right, chopping the head off the neck. I keep lowering the blade, and I'm not chopping the head off. I think in Chattanooga, from what I've seen being in the press here, I'm not in the media, by the way. Andy Burke is right. Even though I'm not saying I'm in the media, Andy Burke says, don't believe him. And he's right. Andy Burke is absolutely right. I'm not in the media. I'm a member of the press. Protected under the Constitution, by the way. The media, I don't think is, but the press is. The press is, and government is to be open to the press. Now, in all my years in Chattanooga, in the press, working 25 years almost at the Chattanooga Time-Free Press, in the CompuDesk, I would say that Chattanooga has this grace. Now, part of the coming of it, I would like to suggest, comes from the 1990s when the police department protected baby killers, and it was a violent job to have. There were men of principle who should not have been police officers if they had to protect a baby killer at the Chattanooga Women's Clinic. But that clinic was closed down by God's grace 20 years ago. So 20 years we have not had the lawless killing of boys and girls in this city. Let me ask you a question. Even if you're not a Christian, do you suppose that the God who reveals himself through the Bible and is the God of, you might say, of Christianity, do you believe that he blesses a city where children are not routinely destroyed by a state-licensed corporation and the people who work as employees in that corporation? Do you think there's a blessing in that? Even if you're not a Christian, would you suppose that the Christian ethic, the Christian judicial ethical system, would say that God blesses a city that does not kill its children and the children of visitors to that city? Would you say that? Well, I would. And because of that, because the police now in Chattanooga don't have to defend the slaughter of babies as they thought they had to at the time, and rough up Operation Rescue activists and harass pro-life Christian people, Protestant and Catholic, because they don't have to do that anymore, and they're not called to do that. They're not given that temptation to do that. Chattanooga and Hamilton County and probably the whole of Southeast Tennessee is under God's blessing. It's a slow accretive process. Blessing. It brings mildness. It brings a sense of a pacific sense. Pacific is reference to the ocean. When the explorers saw the ocean for the first time, they saw how smooth and calm it was, and they said it is pacific. It is quiet and calm as we stand here on the bluff, looking at the glittering expanse in the breeze coming at our faces. And we have a Pacific people, more or less, here in Chattanooga. And that comes by the withdrawing of the hand of judgment of the baby killers at Chattanooga Women's Clinic and the people who ran that. The two women who ran it died horribly of cancer, fairly close to each other, not too long before that place was shut down. It was bought out in a bankruptcy auction in U.S. bankruptcy court downtown. The Christians having amassed more than $200,000. Some in small donations as little as $4 from Sunday school children, putting the money together, pooling the money, and buying the building in bankruptcy. The abortionist, a military man, gave up, I think it may be $240,000 for a junky piece of property that was getting far more than it was worth in bankruptcy, the landlord in bankruptcy. And that is how we are free from that tyranny and that judgment. It is, if you have an abortion clinic in your city, or if you have a doctor who kills babies in your city, and he's doing it with the protection of the police and the protection of the sheriff's department, that city, your city, is under judgment, and it's up to the press to expose that person and to harass that person by shining the light on him continually and that wicked business. You'll find the history, by the way, of Chattanooga Women's Clinic at Nooganomics.com. Nooganomics.com, our chief sponsor. So the question is coming back to policing and I think it's fair to say are occasional abuses of the authority to keep the peace and the authority to enforce statute. Now, as Sheriff Hammond says, and I think it's significant as I'm looking at the legal question of the actual authority of municipal government to run police departments. That's something I'm looking at. I'm trying to think it through. I'm reading court cases on this, and I've probably read 25 cases already on municipal authority, and I'm trying to figure out what the actual authority is of Chattanooga, the corporation, to run a police department. that enforce a statute. Now, Jim Hammond gave me a clue today. He gave me a clue. And he says, though I think he misstated it in his first utterance, he says effectively that he enforces statute and police departments enforce ordinances. And that, if that's the case, and I do believe that is the case, then Chattanooga Police Department cannot run a police department. It just can't. Neither can Saudi Daisy. If they do, the authority of that police department is civil only, entirely civil only. And that seems to be the argument in Chattanooga versus Myers, 1991, I think, or 1990, and City of Chattanooga versus Davis, which is 2001, maybe 2002, in that time frame. So these are cases that seem to have been ignored by the whole constabulary, the whole legal profession, and the judiciary. And I'm not quite sure why these cases don't seem to have the effect that they imply that they have. In other words, are they compelling and controlling, or are they just dicta? Are they just hot air by the judges theorizing about life in Tennessee? And so so we could say that the Chattanooga City Police Department has, if it does have lawful authority to do what it's doing, let's just assume that it does for the sake of this discussion. Then we could say that overall there is more grace here than in other parts of the country. There is less abuse here than in other parts of the country, less violence. And I've been in the news business for a long time, and I don't think I've seen the first video. I haven't received a phone video from anybody saying, "Look, I've been abused by this deputy of Sheriff Hammond. Look, I'm being abused by this deputy, by this officer from David Roddy or his predecessor, Fred Fletcher." I haven't seen those videos. Well, why is that? Well, that's because overall we are blessed in Chattanooga to have these departments in the municipal governments and in the sheriff's department that are pacific. They are mild. They are not violent. They're prone to respect the citizen and not harass the citizen. Go to Nooganomics.com and you can read the essay in which I abstract and summarize the ethics rules for the Chattanooga Police Department. They're quite good, and it seems to me that there is this genteelness overall in the police story, the deputy story in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. And Sheriff Jim Hammond, by the way, is going to be running for re-election, and there is an event this evening, just in case you wanted to go and meet him. It is at the Westin Hotel. It's a new hotel downtown, and it starts at 5:30. And he told me, he said, "Well, you should come by. You should come by." It's on 801 Pine Street, Westin Hotels and Resorts. And he's running for re-election. There's not going to be a deadline for the filings for that office until, I think he said, February. And so there probably will be some other challengers. And so he's getting a head start on that campaign seed money for people who appreciate him and want him to remain in office. He's had that office since 2008, 9 years or so. Well, this is David Tulis. We've got a lot to get to. I do thank you for giving me a moment of your time. And brought to you by Nooganomics.com, Nooganomics.com, the website for the Man Who Matters. You should subscribe. You, my listener, to be the Man Who Matters, have just a few minutes for me every day. But go to Nooganomics and subscribe and get the detailed analysis of where we're going in Chattanooga and Hamilton County. David Tulis, now some announcements.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4 and